Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing great. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much, and I'm so glad you've joined me tonight for a fabulous story. And boy, have I got a fabulous story for you tonight that you're just going to love. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, 30 years earlier, it was so silent and dark when Chelsea finally opened up her eyes, with the blackout curtains drawn in her bedroom. She could not be sure exactly what time it was. It could have been in the middle of the night for all she knew, or early in the morning. She reached out to pat her husband Rick's side of the bed, and it was stone cold to the touch. This meant he'd likely left for work a long time ago, dropping their 8-year-old daughter Ashley off at school. How long had she been fast asleep for? She was likely in the house all on her own, although she could feel the two weighted, reassuring lumps at the bottom of her bed, and could see her two cats, Willow and Saffy, curled up together in a tight little ball, a mohair bundle of sorts, keeping themselves lovely and warm. She could feel a definite chill in the air, as winter was teetering into spring, but the mornings were still nippy, which made getting up early a laborious challenge, most especially for her husband Rick, who had to leave their house while it was still dark outside. Rick would drop off their daughter Ashley at her parents' house, and fortunately her parents lived across the road from the local school, which was awfully convenient for the family. It was Rick who'd insisted they'd installed the blackout curtains, so that during the summer months the intrusive glare of sunlight in their north-facing bedroom would not rouse them from their restful slumber too early. As once Rick opened his eyes, he struggled to get back to sleep again, so the blackout curtains had been a godsend for the couple. Chelsea wrestled with the blankets that cocooned her like a chrysalis bound up in silk, untangling herself from the knots of her bed-sheets. Rick was always tirelessly complaining that during the night Chelsea stole all the bed-sheets for herself. It was true, something she felt incredibly embarrassed and rather sheepish about. It meant that Rick would go to bed, always having to wear a couple of extra sweaters to keep out the cold. She gingerly climbed out of bed, moving over to the curtains, shocking the darkness out of its shadows with the unabashful glaze of the intrusive morning light that bounded into the bedroom like a mischievous child. It even startled the two cats at the end of the bed, who slipped out of their sleepy state, looking up at Chelsea with half-opened green eyes, both crawling hungrily towards the bright yellow puddle of sunlight that dappled the duvet cover, and settled down in their new warm spot, basking delightedly in the thrilling disturbance that the sunlight invited. They fastidiously set to work, grooming each other's coats meticulously, with pink tongues as rough as sandpaper. Saffy was a blue Burmese, Willow a chocolate, both with the most affectionate natures that made them more like dogs than cats, something well known about this breed. Chelsea stood at the bedroom window, staring out at the beleaguered, stone-washed countryside of the bluegrass state, that had looked so weary and subdued for far too long, as if the cruel, punishing hands of winter had wantonly stolen the last summer's beauty away, and callously thrown bleach all over her face. But spring, with a resolute determination and a buoyant, steely grit, was fighting winter back to pave a way for the approaching summer with a vengeance, like two men engaged in a duel. And winter had underestimated just what a tough contender spring actually was, for her sweet whispers of gladness and promise of new beginnings and great opportunities caressed the countryside like the fragrant splashes of pretty pastel colours thrown onto an artist's canvas. The dogwoods in the woodgrove were adorned with ethereal blossoms, and the green grass was doggedly pushing its way through the coarse brown grass. Butterflies and bees could be seen teasing the yellow daffodil heads. It was clear that at long last winter was receding, but she was still fighting back, like a foe that had not quite accepted defeat, not just yet. Chelsea was glad for the rejuvenating long sleep she had enjoyed. It had energized her, but she knew she needed to go downstairs to let her two golden Labradors, Montreal and Toronto, out of their large crate, so that they could run around the countryside to their heart's content. And as usual, when she opened their crates to let them out, they were bounding around outdoors with a spirited ebullience, barking at trees and earnestly sniffing the ground to follow trails and secret scent messages delivered to them by nocturnal visitors that had lightly visited the farmhouse the previous night. She could see Eric Hopkins' old rusty truck parked in their driveway, its front window clouded by mist. It was always good knowing that Eric was around and about. He had become such a fixture and fitting in their family's lives, and even her daughter Ashley called him Uncle Eric. He was loved so much, it would be strange if he were not around. She could see he had let their 6 horses out into the field. He was laying down hay for them to eat, and when he saw Chelsea he lifted up his hand to wave at her. She returned the wave, watching from a distance, smiling to herself contentedly, as her 2 Labradors threw themselves frenziedly at Eric, as if they hadn't seen the man in 3 generations. Eric squatted down on his legs, taking the 2 dogs lovingly into his arms, roughing up their short golden blonde hair. Eric had a magical way with animals, and her 2 Labradors thought the sun shone out of Eric's backside. Chelsea suspected the horses felt much the same way about the young man. Eric managed the affairs of the farm with an effortless ease, making his very challenging job look like it was just a piece of cake. He cleared the riding trails in the grove, chopped firewood, cleaned out the barn, mucked out the stables, managed the upkeep of the house, doing odd jobs here and there, fixing anything that was broken. He ordered all the food for their horses, and was one of those useful people that could turn his hand at absolutely anything, and never needed to be told what needed to be done. And who does not delight in a hard worker like that? Chelsea considered him indispensable in every sense of the word, and was sure that they could not function without him being around. He was like the essential heartbeat of their farm, and without Eric the farm would likely go into coronary arrest, and she had told Eric that often enough. Eric lived with his grandmother in the nearby town, and arrived at their farmhouse promptly before the morning even broke. Later in the morning he'd pop into the family farmhouse to enjoy a coffee or tea, or to make himself a sandwich. He was considered like a member of the family, and was often invited over to enjoy supper with them, to watch television, or to play board games or cards. Chelsea watched Eric being magnanimously assaulted by her 2 dogs, with their flamboyant love display that they had showered all over him, with an impressive sequence of jumping jacks and slobbery wet kisses. "That's enough, Montreal, and you're no better, Toronto," Eric had chuckled, raising himself back to his feet, brushing them away. "If you lick me any more, I will melt like a popsicle. We can't have that, can we?" he joked. Eric put down the rest of the hay for the 6 American quarterback horses to enjoy, who were happily standing in the field under a couple of oak trees that were covered in tiny crisp green leaves, chomping the hay, their sleek coats dappled by the pretty light of the new morning. Eric wiped his hands happily on his faded blue jeans, and eagerly sashayed towards Chelsea, climbing through the middle panel of the wooden fence to get to her. He was wearing on his face his wicked, mischievous grin that lit up his blue eyes and made you like him at once. Eric was the kind of person everyone naturally loved, as he wore his heart on his sleeve, and had a naturally kind disposition. Eric walked with the elegant gait of a cowboy, his boots grazing the brown grass now bespeckled with tenacious green shoots, and he approached Chelsea eagerly. "How are you, Chelsea?" he said with a warm twinkle in his eyes. "Good question, Eric. Very good question. I guess you could say I'm still acclimatizing to the morning. Those blackout curtains made me believe it was still dark outside. I really didn't want to get out of bed this morning. And those 2 Burmese cats of mine certainly make me believe sleeping in all day isn't half such a bad idea. Look at me, I'm still in my PJs and dressing gown. What time is it, Eric?" she asked, letting out a sizable yawn. "I didn't even bother to check the time on the hall clock this morning." "It's about 9:30, said Eric. Chelsea gasped. "Did I really sleep in that long? Goodness gracious, that is insane, isn't it?" "It's good for you, Chelsea," said Eric. "If you slept in so late, your body obviously needed it. That's what my grandmother's always telling me.
She says if we listened to our bodies more attentively, we'd be a whole lot healthier we'd be, and our bodies know how much sleep we actually need. People underestimate, Chelsea, the importance of good sleep, you know. Without it, we don't function at all well. You're just being nice, Eric, making excuses for me so I don't feel bad about being such a lazy slob. No wonder I like having you around. You're forever a gentleman. Even when I look like something the cat dragged in, you're always so incredibly complimentary about how I look. When you tie the knot one day, Eric, your wife will be one lucky woman she'll be. Even if she has a bum the size of the bayou in New Orleans, you tell her it's small. Those are the kind of men I really like.
Eric blushed, his face growing red from the compliment.
I'm a long way off from getting married, Chelsea. But thanks for the compliment all the same. In truth, flattery is not really my thing. I wouldn't compliment you if I didn't mean what I was saying. And for the record, if I did have a wife with a bum the size of the bayou in New Orleans, I might just drown.
At that, they both laughed. Eric was about 22 years old, but he looked every bit like a handsome cowboy, with his bright blue eyes, golden-coloured complexion, and honey blonde hair that hung around his head in long golden strands, that gave him that surfer meets cowboy sort of look. But he didn't have that dopey expression you might see in a carefree surfer. Eric was as sharp as a hawk, and nothing slipped past his beady eyes. He knew everything going on in the farm, and even the species of birds that nestled up in the trees. On this prepossessing spring morning, with the sun spilling through the blue clouds, he was wearing a black cowboy hat, a brown and black plaid jacket, blue jeans, and a pair of cowboy boots. And even if he was covered in hay or muck, he always looked incredibly good, and Chelsea marvelled at that. How could anyone look great after mucking out the stables? But Eric always did.
Spring is on her way, he said, patting Chelsea on the back, which is good news, is it not? Look how frisky the horses are this morning. They're enjoying the sunshine, they are. You can almost feel their abundant happiness. And Bluebell is in a very good mood this morning, exceptionally so. I've never seen her this relaxed. I tell you what, Chelsea, I'll go and put the kettle on, shall I? You go and get changed, or you might just be tempted to stay in your PJs all day.
You're right, Eric. I better go and get dressed. Thank you, Eric. You really are a star. What would I do without you?
Now there's a very good question, said Eric teasingly. I could only imagine your lives would be a chaotic mess without me around. Everything would go to seed and fall apart, he joked.
Don't you dare joke, Eric, said Chelsea. I'm being deadly serious. Things would almost certainly fall apart if you were not around, and I mean that unequivocally.
Don't underestimate yourself, Chelsea, or sell yourself short. You're a very efficient woman. You could manage things very well around here, if I were not around.
That's where you're wrong, Eric, Chelsea insisted. When Chelsea came downstairs into the kitchen a while later, it smelt of toast and coffee. Eric beckoned for her to take a seat on one of the upholstered farmhouse chairs at the long kitchen table that could seat over 8 people. There was a bowl of fruit displayed in the middle of the table, and Eric had laid out 2 placemats to protect the wood from any spillage. The 2 yellow Labradors, after an exhaustive run in the countryside, were lying at their feet, drifting into a pleasing sleep. Chelsea and Eric began to enjoy their coffee together, and Eric always made a mean cup of coffee.
"This coffee is excellent," said Chelsea. Eric grinned. "Of course it's good, Chelsea. I made it. Did you not know I've got magic hands?" he said, lifting up his hand and looking at it as if it was a magic wand. Chelsea giggled. "Something weird happened this morning," he told her. "I've been meaning to tell you about it. And when I say weird, Chelsea, I mean weird. In truth, I cannot make any sense of it. But believe me, I'm trying. And when I say this morning, I'm actually talking about last night. But I discovered it this morning."
"I'm listening," said Chelsea.
"Go on," I'm intrigued. Well, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but all the horses that I put in their stable blocks last night were in different stables in the morning. Now, how do you explain that, Chelsea? For me, it's a bit like figuring out an advanced mathematical equation that is not adding up. The horses were moved during the night, not by me. So who the hell moved them? It certainly wouldn't be Rick moving the horses. Your husband visits them, but he leaves all the management to me. What on earth are you talking about, Eric? Asked Chelsea, looking befuddled. What do you mean the horses moved? You're not making any sense. What I mean is exactly what I say, says Eric, that I have assigned a stall for each horse. I know which stall belongs to which horse. Every night I settle them down to their own individual stall before I actually leave, and they know which stall is theirs. But in the morning, when I returned to the stables, everything had enigmatically changed. I found them all in different stalls, and I didn't move them at all. So how do you explain that? You think someone moved our horses during the night? Asked Chelsea, looking bewildered. I don't think, Chelsea. I know someone did exactly that. Either that, or I'm going completely stark raving mad, and I'm not. So yes, someone was on our property during the night, and they moved our horses around. But why would they do such a thing? Asked Chelsea. That is extraordinary. Were the horses very distressed and upset? You know what they can be like. They're not comfortable with strangers, especially Bluebell. She's a skittish horse if ever I saw one. But then again, look at her this morning. It's like she's had a personality transplant, or she's taken a whole packet of Xanax. She's so incredibly relaxed. I've never seen her like that before. The horses are unusually calm and relaxed this morning, Chelsea. And like I say, Bluebell is a temperamental horse at the very best of times. If anything had upset her during the night, she'd be more stressed out than ever. But this morning she's very content. Indeed, I've never seen her this relaxed before. It is incredibly bizarre, Eric. I honestly don't know how to explain that conundrum. It is bizarre, agreed Eric. You took the words out of my mouth. Bluebell doesn't trust any other handler beyond myself. So something rather peculiar is going on here, he said, removing his cowboy hat and placing it by his placemat, running a hand through his honey-blonde hair, his eyes expressing his obvious confoundment. He let out a sigh. Oh, I hate mystery like this, he said to Chelsea. I know something is going on, and it's making no sense to me whatsoever. It's driving me insane. Even when I was a kid reading a mystery novel, I always read the end before the beginning. I needed to uncover who murdered who. The suspense always killed me. I love thrillers, but I can't help myself needing to know the answers. So mysteries I can't always deal with, and not knowing how the horses ended up in different stalls last night is so perplexing. I can't answer it, and I hate not knowing. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation, Eric, said Chelsea. Was anything taken last night? I mean, there are expensive saddles and stuff in the tack room that is worth quite a lot of money, and would probably be desirable for thieves. Nothing has been taken. So this was not a robbery, Chelsea. It was the first thing that I considered. But everything is exactly as it should be. But I did find some long dark hair, snagged on an old nail against one of the walls of the stables, that I have not seen before. It looks like human hair, but is the colour of midnight. And there was a sizable footprint on the edge of the stable. Absolutely enormous it was. Never seen anything like it before. Whoever was on the property last night had feet the size of the abominable snowman, and was not wearing any shoes. Who does that? Long dark hair, caught up on a nail, said Chelsea, looking perturbed. And huge feet. Well, lots of people have large feet, but people don't go around without wearing shoes. Well, we did have a lot of rain last week, and it's been very muddy around the place. So it is very possible that those footprints just got much bigger after the rain. But seriously, Eric, if it was not a robbery, how about a practical joke? Could one of your friends be messing around with you and have come over to the farm and tried to toy with your head? It wouldn't be the first time that someone pulled a prank on you, Eric. Remember when you put a scarecrow in that field of corn we had? Because of the birds. Then you found a scarecrow hanging high up in a tree like a Christmas ornament. You wondered how anyone could have placed the scarecrow in the tree like that, because it was beyond reach. Yes, but even that I never found out who did it, said Eric. And they pulled the same stunt 2 or 3 more times, I might add. But you are right. It's as if someone's playing games with me. But it would certainly help to know who the practical joker is. It is a possibility it could be my cousin Nick, and he might be behind all this. He's renowned for playing tricks on me. But even he would not pull a stunt like this. He's useless with horses. I doubt he'd have the ability to remove them at night from their stalls, unless he had help from someone who knows their way around horses, which is a possibility. I think I'm going to set up a game camera clandestinely up in there to see what's going on. I have a sense that this is going to happen again. Someone is definitely toying with me. I want to catch them in the act. And if it's my cousin Nick, I'll have his guts for garters, believe me. Mess with me and I'm fine. But don't mess with the horses, for goodness sake, because then I'm not a happy camper. That's a good idea, Eric, putting up a game camera, I mean. It'll put our minds at rest, especially if we find out that no one with duplicitous intent was messing around with our horses or scouting the place for the purposes of a robbery. I mean, you do hear stories, don't you? And I want to know that we have not got some unwelcome trespassers on our property. The thing is, if there are people hiding on our property, they would try to keep a low profile, surely. Not draw attention to themselves like this, which is exactly what they've done by changing the horses around. Talking about trespassers, are you expecting anyone? Asked Eric, looking out of the kitchen window that overlooked the driveway. They observed a car moving purposely down the driveway, throwing its engine into the death rattle, until the noisy engine suddenly spluttered, and then died a very fast death, once the car was finally put into park. Chelsea looked befuddled. Her hands tightened over her warm coffee mug. She didn't like spontaneous drop-ins from strangers. She watched the parked car in the driveway of their farmhouse. For a brief moment the stranger remained in their car, and then finally, slowly but surely, the driver's side door opened. A woman got out, and Chelsea narrowed her eyes to observe the stranger more closely. The woman was elegant, with a sweep of straight blonde hair and bangs that framed a heart-shaped face. She was wearing faded jeans and a snugly fitting leather jacket that accentuated her narrow frame. She appeared to be waltzing over to the trunk of her car, her blonde hair swinging behind her like a billowing curtain. She was pulling out a sizable suitcase that looked like it was packed with gold bullion, as it clearly weighed a ton. What the hell, thought Chelsea, scrunching up her eyes and looking at Eric with a bemused expression on her face. She's getting a suitcase out of her trunk, she told Eric, that she's struggling to actually lift. What the hell? She looks as if she's intending to move in with us. And by the size of that suitcase, it looks like she's folded up the entire state of Nebraska in there. It doesn't look like she's intending to leave any time soon. Why don't I like the look of this, Eric? Do you even know her? Asked Eric. No, I've never seen her a day in my life. She must have got the wrong address, surely. It has to be that. Maybe she thinks we're a bed and breakfast. That must be it. There are quite a few bed and breakfasts around here, you know. The woman walked over to the passenger side door and opened it. She placed her hands on her hips and appeared to be shouting at someone seated inside the car, who was clearly not wanting to get out. Chelsea finally saw a boy of about 10 or 11, climbing reluctantly out of the passenger side seat, with a disgruntled expression on his face. He looked cantankerously indignant, like an unwilling participant in a sports game that didn't want to be dragged onto the field, but had no choice in the matter. The woman snatched his reluctant arm, looping her arm in his, marching him towards the front doorstep, dragging the hideously large suitcase on wheels behind her. She moved with the kind of determined gait of a wrong teacher taking the subordinate pupil kicking and screaming to the headmaster's office for a huge telling off. What on earth was going on here? What was this mother and her rebellious-looking child doing on their property? And what was the heavy suitcase she was wheeling to the front door all about? They had to have the wrong address, surely. For a brief moment it felt as if all the breath had been expunged from Chelsea's lungs, as a rush of hot air seemed to rise from her chest up to her neck and then to her face. She didn't have a good feeling about any of this. There was something unsettling about this mother and her son, and she couldn't put a finger on it, but she felt a little flustered, rather like a fox that had been chased by a pack of hounds. "I'd better get that," said Chelsea, as she heard the knock at their front door. She weaved past Eric in the kitchen, ambling down the passageway in the entrance hall, and unbolted the front door. The woman was standing in the doorway, and close up she was not as pretty as she had first appeared from the distance. Close-up scrutiny could be most unkind, and the bright light of the spring morning was not flattering on her complexion. It lacked the benefits of the soft light in a photographic studio that could turn a pig's ear into a silk purse with great ease. Chelsea noticed tired, weathered skin that was aging before its time, like a boot that had been left out in the elements for far too long, and had been subjected to too much wear and tear. There were dark, formidable shadows under the woman's eyes, as if she was greatly sleep-deprived. The telltale wrinkles around her mouth suggested that she was a heavy smoker, so her teeth were a little on the yellow side from all the nicotine stains. The woman looked slightly haggard, rather than actually being in good shape, like someone who's had a really rough life, like a doll that's been battered around the place by the family poodle. "How can I help you?" asked Chelsea, persuading herself that this woman had got the wrong address. But the woman rudely pushed past her in the doorway, grabbing her son by the hand and leading her into the house, along with the suitcase that was choking at the seams, it was so full, looking suspiciously like it would burst open like a seed pod, so that the contents would go flying absolutely everywhere. She walked into Chelsea's farmhouse as if she had every right to just barge into a stranger's abode, with a confident assertiveness and cocky swagger that was nothing short of baffling to Chelsea, who was completely staggered and put out by the woman's dogged impertinence. "So sorry," said Chelsea. "Do I know you? What do you think you're doing here? I think you must have got the wrong address or something. I don't appreciate people just barreling into my house like you have, as if my house is a hotel foyer, without exercising any kind of manners whatsoever. Who the hell do you think you are? And why on earth are you bringing that lumbering, great big hulking suitcase into my house? If you think this is some kind of bed and breakfast, you are sadly mistaken, my friend." The woman's smile turned into a nauseous grin. "No, I have not got the wrong address. I know this place well. It's Rick's dad's farmhouse, and I'm guessing he left the place to Rick. It's sad the old bugger died, isn't it? But then he did choose to sire children when he was half dead himself." She tuttered under her breath. "I never understood men having kids when they're long past their prime. But then again, that's Rick's dad for you. He was a late bloomer. I don't know who you think you are, my friend, but I don't appreciate your rudeness. I've never met anyone so rude in my entire life. How do you know my husband Rick? And furthermore, what are you doing here? I could call the cops, you know. But if you go, we'll say no more about how you presumptuously just barreled into my house like this." "I'm going to make this very quick," said the woman. "I need to talk to you in person, and I'll explain everything shortly. You'll feel awfully silly if you call the cops. Where is your kitchen? A coffee would be very nice," she said, ignoring Chelsea's half-hearted threat to call the cops. Eric was still seated in the kitchen, nursing a coffee and biting into a piece of toast covered in peanut butter and jelly. When the strange woman and her son entered the kitchen together, he looked at them in surprise and just nodded politely as you do. He was never comfortable with strangers. He was naturally reticent and reserved by nature. He hurriedly glugged down the remnants of his coffee.
The woman brazenly, without so much as batting an eyelid, walked over to a chair, pulled it out from beneath the kitchen table, opposite where Eric was sitting. She sat down on it, gesturing for her son to take the chair next to hers, which he did so with a bored but less than amused expression on his face. His young face seemed to be permanently wearing an unpleasant scowl, and his dark eyes seemed hostile and cold. The woman rattled around clumsily in her long leather shoulder bag, as if looking for something on the inside. She finally pulled out a box of cigarettes and a lighter. She lit up a cigarette which she popped rather gracelessly into her mouth, and began blowing out large blasts of cigarette smoke into the kitchen, so the smoke billowed over the room and floated out of an open window. Chelsea wanted to stop her smoking at once, but promptly decided against it. The sooner this obnoxious woman and her moody, truculent son got out of her home, the better. But clearly the woman had something to say, so Chelsea would hear her out, and then demand she leave at once. That would be the reasonable thing to do in the circumstances, but she was still reasonably niffed by the woman's presumptuousness. "Ah, that is so much better," said the woman agreeably, inhaling the cigarette smoke, as if it was life-giving oxygen for her, which Chelsea suspected it was. She imagined the malnourished woman lived on coffee and cigarettes, as the mainstay of her diet. Of that Chelsea was most sure. She was not the embodiment of good health. Indeed, a close-up picture of her on the back of a box of cigarettes might put you off smoking for life. For this young woman at one time could have been quite attractive, Chelsea decided, but certainly not any more. From a distance, yes, but close up, it was bad news. The woman grabbed Eric's empty coffee mug and dragged it across the table to her side. She began using the coffee mug as a makeshift ashtray. "Sorry about that," she said apologetically to Eric, not looking sorry at all. "I don't want to get ash over the table. I like to respect people's property, you see." "I think I better get going," said Eric, whose face had grown as red as a field of poppies. "I'll make myself scarce, shall I? For you ladies to have a nice talk," he said uncomfortably, feeling that perhaps it was not his place to remain in the kitchen with female company around. "You're staying, Eric," came Chelsea's firm, demanding voice. She didn't want to be left alone with this strange, manic woman and her truculent son. The woman was making herself sumptuously cosy at the kitchen table, as if she had every right to be there. Ostensibly, in Chelsea's opinion, there was something profoundly off about the both of them, and she had taken an instant disagreeable dislike to this woman, who was for some reason making her skin crawl. She didn't like self-entitled people that walked into your house as if they owned the place in the way that this woman had done. Who the hell did she think she was? She had a bloody cheek and seemed to enjoy ruffling up Chelsea's feathers, like the family dog might enjoy stressing out the chickens in the coop. "Are you making that coffee or not?" said the woman coquettishly, giving Eric a big wink. "I have mine black with no sugar. I'm sweet enough, you see," she said, laughing at her own joke, as if she thought she was hilariously funny. But no one appeared to be amused. "What is all this about?" asked Chelsea curtly, as she rolled over a mug of black coffee towards the woman. "You better make this quick and then go. Even my 2 golden Labradors are not happy with your presence. I have never heard them growl at a stranger before, like they're doing to you now." "There is no need to be so abrasive. Look at you, you're as tight as a sailor's knot," said the woman. Oh dear, I think somebody got out of bed the wrong way, did they not?" she said scathingly, looking at Chelsea through narrowing eyes. "You must be rather dithery. Did you know you're wearing your sweatshirt inside out?" "I do, as it happens," said Chelsea, her face flushing pink with indignance. "I don't like the logo on front of my sweatshirt, so I deliberately turned it inside out. Not that it is any of your business. Let's make this quick, shall we? Who are you? Might be a very good start." "The name's Rachel Carson. Has not your husband Rick told you about me?" "Naughty, naughty boy," she said, shaking her fingers. "But why am I not surprised?" she said mischievously, the corners of her mouth twitching upwards, as if she was trying her best to suppress a huge grin. So there we are. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye, good night.